som dessverre måtte melde avbud I dag, men vi har fått en toppvikar, vår egen Anne Hilde Neset. Så min dame og herre, Anne Hilde Neset og Weiner.
Tusen takk, Hanne. I'm going to switch to English. Yes, we're very, very sorry about Lotte not being here, and I'm sort of thrown into this last minute, and I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to adhere to a strict time, because we don't want this to run for a long time.
Well, don't worry about that.
Yeah, well, Lawrence has a flight this tomorrow morning and so on, so we're going to try and not be over about 45 minutes. And there'll probably be time for maybe a couple of questions from the audience. We'll just play it by ear, all right?
Go for it.
So welcome, a warm welcome to you all, and a warm welcome to Weiner. It's an honor to have you here. I'm going to read a little intro, partly written by Lotte and partly written by me. Just to sort of set the scene, Weiner is one of the most influential artists alive. His work has been exhibited over 5 decades in 4 Venice biennials and 4 editions of Documenta. In his work, language becomes a material to make sculpture. Words are objects. Underlying the work is a political impetus, yet the work is in no way didactic or explicit. As he puts it, you can change the whole world with art because you change the culture. Self-taught as an artist, his urgent...
I must stop you there.
Okay.
Nobody is ever self-taught.
No, that's very true.
You can't teach yourself something you don't know.
It's... So, should I blame Lotte now? I don't know. Anyway. Your urgency to make art broadly available and engaging stems, he says, from his childhood in the South Bronx. I didn't have the advantage of a middle-class perspective. Art was something else. Art was the notations on the wall or the messages left by other people. I grew up in a city where I had read the walls. I still read the walls. I love to put a work of mine out on the walls and let people read it. Some will remember it, and then somebody else comes along and puts something else over it. It becomes archaeology rather than history. And I'm nearly done. He had his first noted work, if we are to believe all the many books and articles written on him, was called Cratering Pieces in 1960, where he detonated a series of explosives in a California state park, the results of which he declared to be sculptures. Weiner has been living partly in Amsterdam for nearly 40 years, and he's considered to be somewhere in between an American and a European artist. A lot of people in a lot of places around the world consider themselves to have a personal relation with Weiner because he has this ability of talking to a group of people and still make everyone feel like he's talking directly to them. And of course, the same goes for here in Norway. I mean, the evidence on show here tonight, where he has done a number of works, and including here at Kunstnernes Hus in 2006 and in 2015. So I don't know if there were lots of mistakes in there, but I don't think so.
There can't be mistakes. It's reality.
It's reality, and Lotte does impeccable work. So, and Lotte found this statement of intent written in 1968 that you can read above you. And I sort of just wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about this.
About that?
About that.
Yeah, I must explain. I make specific objects, and they have no specific form. Because they have no specific form and they can't be put in a package, they don't consider them objects. And from that moment on, we'll move on. But as far as the statement of intent was, I thought it was necessary because there are a lot of people that follow art and see art, and in New York it's a very tight situation. There's art all over the place, and most people don't have the opportunity to be told what it is, just to be explained what it is. So I decided I would explain that artists make work. Work is fabricated by other people. And there are some artists who have figured out, I'm not the only one, that if you can just tell everybody what it is, they can put the picture together themselves. That was it, each being equal and with each other, and then that's not a problem, each being equal and consistent with the intent of the artist. The decision is made by the people who are going to use it. Art is a useful thing. You go to art because it tells you something that you want to use to know something else. If it gives you something that you can't use, then it's not really basically art. And that's all art is. It's the simplest thing that, because it's difficult to do, they've made it into a big deal with certification and tests of what? I was recently in a situation, beautiful building, beautiful people, nicest situation for artists, and they teach young artists how to package, make money, because you have to make money if you're not in a socialized country. No, it's true. Reality is reality. But they would state-of-the-art buildings and state-of-the-art laboratories and studios. The only trouble was nobody knew what kind of art to make that didn't look like somebody else's. And my interest in life is to be absolutely, when I walk into an exhibition, not to understand what the hell is going on. I'm a fast read, maybe it'd take me 5 minutes. It may take me 5 years, but it could take you 5 minutes, fine. But if you know what you're walking into, why are you bothering? If you know what the translation is, I was working with some people and they tried to be helpful. And they said, just tell me what it looks like and we'll make it. I'm looking at them and saying, it'll look like what it is when you're finished. I can't wait. Well, I can.
Yeah, it's at one point, your work, which is made of words and letters.
No, it's made of materials, and the words are the way that you know the materials we're talking about.
Right, and tell us about that.
That's not so complicated. It's not at all a trick. You can only know what's going on in the world if you can give it a name. It's called numbering. It doesn't much matter what you call it. It's like children. Children all are saying something when they're making noises. We haven't learned their language, and we're much bigger than they are, so we force them to learn our language. Now, art, there should be no reason of forcing anybody into anything. But if you follow the logic of what's being presented, you're stuck with it, because you can no longer go back to the early things that you knew. I liked, my mother liked, this one liked. No, you get it right or you get it wrong. I never expected that to be in my work. I always figured that anybody that was interested got it right. Why would they bother to be paying attention? That's the problem. Why would they pay attention to me if what they had worked pretty well and now they want to add something to it? No, it is what it is. Each person has a dignity. When they make art, it's a relationship of an artist to a rock, to a stone, to wood, to blue, to green, to red, to yellow. And that's it. It really has no metaphor and has no value other than allowing you to know what everybody's talking about. I can't see you through the thing. It's amazing. It's like, no, it's like the Second World War movies. Hello, America.
I don't know if it can go down a little bit, the light.
No, don't worry so much. It's okay.
Or turn a little bit or something.
So.
I mentioned the Bronx and your childhood, and you've talked about it also in several interviews. What did your background mean to you and the way that you work?
I was very lucky to be in New York City. but it didn't mean anything to me. It was one of the places that I couldn't wait to get out of. No, it was unpleasant. There was nothing wrong with the people. Everybody was fine. It was an unpleasant situation. And that's all I know from the South Bronx. I learned nothing.
And you love the Arctic.
What?
You love the Arctic.
I had a nice intervention as a kid. One of the things is that I had no backing. I was not plugged into the system. So in order for me to go adventuring, I had to pick the most incredible adventurous places that nobody wanted to go to. And that was the Arctic. And then I found people in north of Montreal. And I sort of got very enamored of some people that were there. But essentially it was really looking for places where they would let me be an undocumented person. And there I was. I learned a lot in the Arctic, but I learned a lot in the jungle. I've learned a lot in other places. One of the interesting things of being an artist and not teaching is that you continually learn. You don't have to prove yourself to anybody. Is that an answer?
You've said that it's an artist's responsibility that her art cannot be miscomprehended as fascism. Can you say something about that?
I'm so sorry, it's my age. Growing up in a time when fascism really meant something. Now it doesn't mean anything. These are just evil people. No, I'm very serious. They're not fascists. They don't even believe in a state. They don't believe in anything but them and their family. And that's not my problem. That's not what I make art about.
What about the political situation in the US today? Is there a way that artists can work against it?
It depends. Most artists haven't even noticed there's a political situation. They think Sotheby's Christie's is the Diet, is the Parliament. It ain't. I don't know what to say. I don't have anything to say about it. I find that this situation in the United States right now, in the UK right now, in most of continental Europe, especially Poland, just disgusting. These are sad people who are running around trying to relive power at a time. What nobody realizes that during the fascist times in Italy and here and in the north too a little bit, nothing was produced of any merit. Heavy water, but heavy water did not come from a fascist system. But nothing was produced. I think we have to stop worrying so much about reconciling ourselves to the Second World War. And start reconciling ourselves to right now, to what it must be for a young person who wants to make art. And they're not quite sure even what art is. And I was one of those young people. I wanted, because I knew literature well, and I was working as a kid, and I wanted to make art. Happily, it worked out, and happily, a lot of older artists were quite generous and gracious. It was before the university structure, when it became sort of family units fighting in schools, who was where, and who was who, and who was the head of the department, and who was the butt of the department, and who was the feet of the department. I think that times are so complicated right now that it's time for artists to take their responsibility. Your lifestyle is noblesse oblige. It's nice. A lot of people became artists, myself included, because the lifestyle was a lot better than the lifestyle that was being offered to me. But that's not the reason for the existence of art. It's not an excuse for living a certain way. It's not even an aspiration to live a certain way. It's about the understanding of a human being to an object. And if you can give dignity to a stone, when you walk on that stone, you have more dignity. It's that simple. I don't find, I never thought, everybody, I read all this stuff, I'm old now. And I read all this stuff and it gives me credit of radical revolution. No, it's not true at all. What's true is artists are very, very decently connected to the world. And if you can make something from what you believe, you got it. But the other stuff, it's not radical. I never did anything radical in my life, except not agree with racism in the United States. No, I'm very serious about it, but that's something else. That reminds me of my most favorite anecdote is Jean-Paul Sartre, who was a very conservative man, basically, as a person. Writing a book on Flaubert, and then somebody came and said, "Why are you selling Humanité," which was a leftist newspaper, on the street? You're too high for that, you can't do that. And he looked at them and said, "From 7 in the morning till 12 in the afternoon, I'm maybe the best literature Europe has ever had. But afterwards, je suis seulement un citoyen de la France. I'm just simply an American, a citizen of France. And I don't like what's going on." And they say, "But doesn't that affect what you make?" He said, "Why should it? Every person has been making art their entire life in situations that they do not approve of. We can't help ourselves, but we can change it. And art is one of the things that produces a change in logic. If you can change the logic of people, you can change the way they think. You don't have to tell them what to think or tell them what you think is wrong. Change the logic completely, and you'll find the most amazing things happening. Quite frankly, that's what I found. I found my discovery of a certain kind of logic as a child allowed me to step over these other problems. And the logic is interesting. It's like the new thing about all of these people that were worrying about being a genius. When they got quantum mechanics in their hands, they realized they couldn't be a genius because there was no quantum mathematics. You couldn't buy and sell it. Well, that's the kind of art that I like to make. Art that people, when they find it, they find their place in the sun. Not because of what I said, but because of what I didn't say, maybe. But it's their place in the sun, and I like that a lot. Sorry.
It was just a work.
What's behind me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's the deer.
Yeah. But just before that was water made it wet, which I believe
in Norway.
Yeah. Can you say anything about your impetus for making that?
No, I was so glad to be invited to be in that situation. I'm trying to confront myself with what would work on a wall in a place where people were, doing fish. But that's what that scan is all about. It's like all the Italian participations have always been in tuna slides, the place where they slaughtered the fish. Well, all I could deal with was the other aspect of it, that water made it wet. And it seemed to be the right thing to be doing at the time.
How about the knee pieces in Norway, the OSL Contemporary Long Ago, Far Away, which is on show now?
It's on show now at Oslo.
Yeah.
And, no, I don't know. Each artwork that you make, that you put out public, is really a quest for somebody to pay attention to the fact that you thought about something that essentially everybody said wasn't your business. But as an artist, it is your business. And artists are in a great situation, if you want to think about it. Maybe for Europeans it's a snap, because you get food and medical care and house to live in. Maybe for some other cultures, American, New York, it's not a snap. But in fact, it's quite simple. A human being stands up and says, I'm willing to sort of make public my looking into the relationship of human beings to things. And because of that, maybe because I'm an old-fashioned American socialist, I think everybody's entitled to enough to eat and a roof over their head. Rich and famous, it's not going to happen most of the time. But to be able to spend your life every morning that you wake up and look at what's in the glass, not the glass. The glass is the society, but there's a liquid in the glass, and if the glass is water, or if it's aquavit, or if it's brandy, to be able to give it its due is what we try to teach people by making art. How to give things their due. Okay, does that answer?
Give things
I'm not good at answering, but...
Yeah. No, I think you're doing pretty well. Giving things your due, just returning to materiality
Yes.
for a moment. You made your own font called Margaret C. Worthy Gothic.
Oh yeah, they're designing a font, but lots of people make a font.
Mm.
I had to use always sans serif, those things without the little curlicues. And I was using a thing called Franklin Gothic Extra Condensed, and various, and I was very strict and all of that. And then realized that there was typefaces that were really reactionary, like Helvetica, and so they were considered revolutionary at the time. And then they were taken on by the means of power that you didn't want. And there it was. So I sat about, oh, it was such a trauma. It took so many years you couldn't believe. I drew the whole font by hand. Why not? Like I said, there wasn't anybody waiting at the door saying, you better have a font ready for me. And it worked. And I was so proud of it, but it only got as far as uppercase.
Uppercase, yeah.
I didn't have enough resources to get to the lowercase. And you couldn't explain to people, I'm sorry, you know, it takes a couple of sometimes days to put together the vowels and the this and the that. And it's better not to mention it, just to go on and just use it. I also found another typeface one day with an assistant of mine, Kimberly. And we looked and looked and looked, and we may have looked at maybe over 100 typefaces. And I found a typeface. And I said, this is a stencil typeface, I'd like to use it as well. We bought it, we arranged it. And it's a funny story because I was very proud of it. And all of a sudden, somebody had made it, and they get credit, and they get money. But they were not handling it correctly. And I didn't know how to bring about the idea that they could turn around and they could say, okay, this is another typeface. They didn't. They argued. And the man making my catalog at the Volkswagen Museum in Germany turned and sort of said, oh, and he became crazy. And I found out what it was. It was a misunderstanding of my idea of life and their idea of life. I was so proud when people used what I made, and he was so offended that I would choose something that was one of his students. I didn't know anything about it. I found a typeface. Have you ever looked at typefaces on a computer? There's so many, and when you see one, you're not going to ask who did it, what are they like, and what are their parents like. And that was
still, fonts really give a personality to text.
Yes.
And people have quite a intimate relationship with fonts.
Yes, of course.
And so they should, but it's somehow something that isn't very often talked about.
It's often talked about by people who deal with fonts. Why should it be talked about with people who deal with cheese?
Because the people who deal with cheese might need to describe their cheese at one point.
Then let them choose a type font. They're all over the world. It's a simple thing, and you pay for it and you use it.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's not very expensive.
So people call you one of the founders of conceptual art.
Let's say that people often make mistakes.
Fair enough. But what is conceptual art then?
What is conceptual art? I don't know. I am very happy to have it. I have only one child. And I thought conceptual art was the making of children. What else is conceptual besides making of children? We're not gods, and we make children. That's all we know how to do besides making art. We make kitchen, children, and art. There's not much left in the world to make. No, so conceptual art, I don't know what it means. It was people who felt badly that their parents had put them through art school, and then they were stuck with these other people who were making a specific object with no specific form. And I don't know what they should do about it, because they're not happy. They can't show it to their parents and say, this is what I make. So they set up this thing called conceptual art. And they were leaving behind the old idea of art, but you wouldn't know about something if it wasn't an object. So it's nonsense to say you're getting rid of objects. The nonsense is that they wouldn't accept the fact that if it didn't look the way they wanted, the way it looked in art history books, it didn't exist. So they made conceptual art, and it meant when they later needed a job, they could get one as the head of the board or the chairman of the conceptual art department. And then they stopped worrying about what conceptual art was supposed to be, and they started to talk about, it's all about interaction of artists. No, it's not. Art is art. It has nothing to do with interaction. If you want to help the world, go out and demonstrate in the street, and also change the structure. And if you don't believe that that matters, it certainly does. Remember, the Black Panthers in the United States was completely destroyed by the government only for one reason. They gave free, decent breakfasts to poor kids. And that gave that poor kid a chance to compete against the children of the middle class. I never figured out why they didn't want more smart kids in their society. They didn't. They were frightened for their own children. And happily, none of them ever turned up again. I mean, I'm coming from a different class, and I really never understood these people trying to exclude everybody. Art is about putting something in a public place that has no authority, no belief systems, and yet everybody looks at it and can use it to understand themselves in relation to the world. They don't have to change. And I see art as that. I don't want to sit here and talk about what I did, what I didn't do. I've had a very lucky, very long public engagement with the world. But the engagement has always been about something, not about me. I like me. I'm not at all denigrating me, and I'm pretty honest, and I pretty basically don't talk about things I don't know about. But it's not enough. I'm sorry. It really isn't. What's enough is those things, those objects you see when you walked into a museum the first time in your life, and you saw a Pollock, you saw the Giacometti thing about the palace at 4 a.m. When you saw those things, it all fell into place for you, that there were people out there who were not trying to get credit for being existential. They were trying to participate by really, by really participating. Gosh, revolutionary things make you hiccup.
You have a piece called An Object Tossed from One Country to Another, and another one that says a translation from one language to another. And there's a sort of a great shift in both of those pieces, and something is going through a transformation in the reader's mind during the sort of the moment or the seconds that they comprehend what they're reading. Can you say a little bit about the process of your work? How do you start? Do you start out by knowing a location?
No.
Do you start No.
No, go on.
No. Do you envisage?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. I take for granted that each artist is very much like each taxi chauffeur. They learned how to drive. You can't spend your whole life now talking about the fact that I learned how to drive. So, no, I'm very serious about that. I don't know how I start. I get interested in materials. The whole Dia show that I did was all based on concrete. Something that they measure concrete by yards in English. They don't measure concrete by the weight. And my turn was that I was interested in the weight, because as a child I unloaded ships that had dry concrete. It was about the weight. It wasn't at all about anything else. So a lot of our misunderstandings is like somebody who wants to be a welder and has never had a piece of metal in their hand. That's not my problem. It's also not the problem of the art world. It's the problem of the academic world. If you want to confront people who know things, tell them something. If you don't teach them it, how are they supposed to know it? It's not God-given. And that's my feelings of my whole life. The thing is to make something. You can make graffiti anywhere in the world. You have a right to. But it has to say something. It has to say either my children are hungry or the sky is blue. Both are equally valid. And that's what I base my life on. That my children are hungry is an important thing because they shouldn't be. But the sky is blue is an important thing because it is. That sounds really top. But I'm terribly, I wish my life were like that. My life is it's mostly intellectual drudgery, trying to figure out how to develop something to the point that the people who have based their entire life on it, and it's wrong, do not get so destroyed by it that it becomes, the argument is that, becomes like Darwin, where they'll fight about store, but they won't fight about the little thing about the fact that they don't have any longer any resistance in their fields against something because something worked out and they didn't know how to bring it about. Well, artists are supposed to know how to bring things about, and artists are not supposed to make silly mistakes just because so-and-so says, I'll buy that if you say that. No, I'm terribly sorry, nobody in the world wants to be like that. We're in the Western world here. Why would I want to be like that if I can get away with it? That's so it's looked at as radical and as courageous. It's not at all. It's a bare fact. Is that an answer? I'm sorry. I'm not. As I said, I'm not really good at answers.
You're pretty good. You're doing well. What about another beautiful piece you have that says "Learn to read art"?
That's not a piece of mine. That was the one I lived with. Was working for a while for charities with printed matter, and she asked if I would make a thing for them, and they all talked about it, and it seemed to learn to read art. It seemed pretty good. I don't like to tell people to do things, but that's one of the times you can cross over the line. And once you learn to read art, you can accept it or reject it. And that was the point.
How do you mean accepted or rejected?
If you don't, have you ever been confronted on the road sometimes with somebody whose language you couldn't figure out? And they couldn't communicate with you in anything else? And then you get an insight, and all of a sudden you see something because you understood their language. And it's either right or it's wrong. And most of the time it's wrong. But the point is you can understand it. Learn to read art just says Pay attention. If it's not for you, push it out of the side. Okay, it's not authoritative. Yeah, I'm pleased with that. I'm pleased with a lot of other things. It's like the ships at sea. Are we? But the big question for me was, is it the ships at sea, are we, or is it the ships at sea, is we? And I had that problem with this piece that I was working on, because there's a thing I did was all the ships at sea, are we? Because I couldn't bear the idea that people were standing on the dock and laughing at people drowning that were trying to get away from whatever they were trying to get away from. And with that in mind, I decided, okay, you just do it. And I said, it's all as all the ships at sea, as we, meaning to take something that I never believed in most of my life, empathy, and to turn it into an object. If you can relate to the fact that you're one of the ships at sea with the people, you have turned yourself into a citizen without having to preach anything. You don't have to believe in a government in order to realize that you shouldn't eat babies. I'm using that as an expression, but it's really, you shouldn't do half the things you did. That's the point, and with art, you can build up a structure that allows something to exist without doing the right thing. It doesn't allow anything to exist when you do the wrong thing. And the wrong thing is commercial slavery, racial slavery, gender slavery. The whole idea, it's all about slavery. I'm coming from a culture that was based in the United States on slavery. Okay, my great relatives, they came from places where they were slaves. Serf is a slave. Other people came from places where they were slaves, and they came to this country, and all of a sudden, what happened was the middle class stepped in. And the one thing they never understood why was abstract expressionism so fabulously important for Europeans. Ask for Jorn, this one. It was because these were men who came from a class that was already determined that they were going to be what they are, wage slaves or working in the factory. And they turned it around into a celebratory experience. And that was the whole purpose of the Second World War for a lot of those artists, from Pollock to this one, to de Kooning. And they all came, some came from Europe. But the fact that you were reaching a point where you did not have to understand or accept the cruelty of a culture, but you could accept its generosity and its celebration. So abstract expression was a celebration of men. The problem was that they were in a society that was not terribly comfortable with men having feelings and writing poetry and making paintings. And so they wandered around in their engineer boots and screwing too many people without saying thank you, ma'am. I mean, they just did all the things to show that they were still, in their eyes, men. And I'm of the generation that didn't have to prove themselves as men. Really? I don't think so.
I'm sorry,
No, but this placing yourself in a dominant culture is a thing maybe that has left us out of being able to talk about art as a way to change the world. And I really think it is. Well, don't take him out. It's okay.
I think she needs their loo.
We can survive with him without any trouble. Oh well, ciao. No, I'm very serious about this. I have a problem. I mean, everybody's been making me talk about my youth and my childhood. I don't really think a lot about it. But in fact, maybe it's a good idea to think about it. Or somebody once, I was giving a talk and I didn't want to, but I did it. And then they said, well, we can't relate to you. Your life has been so romantic. And I said, no, it hasn't. Well, it was people that were working class. I was of a class where I had to go to work as a kid. And I had a choice. Take something really romantic or work at a 7-Eleven. They both constitute work and giving up your time. And they both about paid the same. And I took the romantic one. I took the one from the ships. I took the one from the docks. And that's all it is. It's a matter of deciding, well, I have to do this. I may as well do something that does something good for other people besides just feeding me. Although feeding me is important to me. Was there anybody, how are we doing?
No, I think we're doing pretty well. I think we have time for a couple of questions.
I'd appreciate that very much, because sometimes I must tell you, an artist is living, the reason I make movies is I didn't want to write journalistic articles about the things in the 60s that were making sense politically. And I figured I would make a mise-en-scène. Mise-en-scène is a movie. But the whole problem with this is that we have to realize that artists are just people. They're not metaphors for other things. They're just absolute people. And they're doing the best they can as people. As artists, it's another story. You make a piece of bad art, you're a bad artist. It's that simple. You make a mistake, you're not a bad person necessarily. How do you reconcile that in your life as people wanting to make art and wanting to participate? That's my question to you.
Yeah. So, anybody?
No, to you.
To me?
Yes, to you. I allow myself to sit here and be asked questions in public. I can ask you a question.
How do I reconcile
this whole question about making art and being good and being bad, being a good person and a bad person? What else can we think about? We're not that damn important in the universe unless we press the wrong button and it blows up.
I don't think that an artist necessarily is a bad artist just because they make a bad work.
Oh, I do.
You do?
They're a real artist, they're a concerned artist, they're a legitimate person. They're not a bad person.
That's true.
But the art stinks.
If
it does, I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Then again, as a person, you might make quite a lot of mistakes during the course of a day.
Yes. But, you know, art is a strange thing. Nobody asks you to make it. So when you put it out in the world, you better damn well be right. And if you just made it to fit into a commercial structure, sad you, but that's your problem. It's certainly not the world's problem. The world's problem is to find out how to find art. And the workshops of artists in these situations are disgusting. Being lower class around successful cultures with art is disgusting. Why can't we just avoid it? Everything that's made is like in the market. It comes out on the table and there it is. It either works or it don't work. And if it don't work, you take it and you fix it and make it work.
Do you prefer working in open space or
I don't work.
In public space?
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
I like things to be in public, and it's one of the ways I can show what I do, which is extremely hermetic in a public situation. But I don't like it or dislike it. I don't really mind. I'm happy enough. I'm a very old-fashioned person with a very romantic idea. I'm convinced that if you can understand the relationship of the aquavit to the water, and you can convey it to somebody else, any way you can do it is fine. Drawing, music, language, it doesn't matter. As long as you can get across what you're trying to say as a person, it doesn't matter what the medium is.
No. I get that, but
I take it for granted. I expect everybody to get good at the medium they choose.
Of course. But I also think, I mean, you've been talking about great art as a great equalizer.
It is an equalizer. It gives everybody a flat field to show what they can do. And if they can move the ball this way, and other people can move it that way, what's the difference? It got where it was supposed to go.
That's true. I guess the only difference between the public and the private space is that in the reality, a lot of private collectors would buy a piece that not everybody would get to see.
No, as a matter of fact, most artists would not allow that anymore. It's a silly idea. When that person dies, you die. But the work you made is supposed to be able to go into another generation and either be used or not used because it didn't work. No, all of this. Anyway, any relation, if you've noticed, I've been very careful for the evening not to speak about its relation commercially. It's a now unknown fact. People in this room have to earn a living. They either earn it because they have a decent country that they come from that helps them along or not, but in fact they have to earn a living. And when they do, they have to make a choice that they'll make to earn a living, but they'll try to do it in a way that doesn't go against what they believe in. And that's not easy, but it's possible. That's my only role as an artist outside of making art, is to try to explain that there is a way to fit within the society, criticizing it and still fitting in. Because that's your role, that's the job you've taken. And nobody forces anybody to be an artist, and the nice thing for artists is, remember, you're not flying an airplane, you're not filling a prescription. You made a mistake, you fucked up, you just turn around and say sorry. It's like one of those American television programs where the woman looked up and said, sorry. I think that artists should start to have a little bit more freedom from the doctrine thing. The only reason you need doctrine is to make your teachers understand you. You don't need doctrine even to make your parents understand you. The only reason you need doctrine is because the people that are forcing you for doctrine haven't produced anything. They're looking to find from you what to produce. Art education is probably the worst thing that happened to art. No, I don't mean that to be funny. We have no idea of the competence of the people who control the art world. Most of them are assholes. But most people in the world are assholes. Why did we give all the power of the culture, all the aspirations of young people, to a bunch of people who didn't produce anything yet? They want to talk about it. There's nothing to talk about. You make it or you don't make it. You want to talk about it, you do it in private. It's not a public endeavor. That's my answer.
It sounds like the sort of final words, in a way, given that we're talking about...
Final, did you say, or fine?
Final. But I
no,
did
not at all final.
I did, yes, here we go. Maybe you can, I don't know if we have ambulating... oh yeah, we do. Hold on.
We have ambulatory amplification. Ambulatory amplification.
Hello, my name is Jan.
What's your name?
Jan.
John. Hello, John.
Thank you for your wonderful speech and talk. And it's very inspiring, actually. And I have a question about how you have been when these thoughts appeared, because you've been making such consistent work for so many decades, that you have seems to have such a clear idea of the breaking the logic and challenging the logic of life and of art. And I'm curious how that came about and how early that happened, and what kind of artists you were discussing with and talking to, and who inspired you as well at that time. Because I guess you said art should challenge logic, and at some point conceptual art became a mannerism itself, maybe.
Yeah.
And I'm curious.
Yeah, you have to be careful with that.
Exactly. Sorry. But I'm curious about these issues, these questions.
I honestly am, you're talking about me. I've been spending for some strange reason, the last year or so, with everybody wanting to talk about what you did when you were young. I don't know how I came about it. I stood there and said, they're not going to let you in. You're coming from the wrong place. But a few of the people who make it that you've talked to seem to find it okay. I don't know how I came about it, but I did come about the fact that I looked at it and said, just because they're offering you a car doesn't mean you have to learn to drive. And that was that simple. And from that, you'll have to make out your own logic from it. Just because a society offers you an automobile doesn't mean you have to learn to drive. And if you don't learn to drive, you can't drive. There's no imposition on you to enter into their culture. And your work is about, I did a piece with manhole covers. I'm sorry, Alice, but it's the same story again. But the television in New York, the cable television at that time, was a lot, you could say anything you wanted. You didn't have to worry about words or politics. And somebody said, hey, we know you were involved in civil rights and all of this, and you're an angry person. I said, yes. And they said, well, why aren't you being angry with this work, which was a thing in relation to another thing? And I said, because my idea of life is not to fuck up somebody's day on their way to work, but to fuck up their whole life. And do you know something very strange? Is the people that you thought were authoritarian thought that was an extremely democratic thing to say. And from that moment on, I realized, okay, say what you really have to say and see what happens. It worked out okay. That's the truth. Why do you want to ruin somebody's day to say, oh, no, no, no? And it turns out it's always hypocrisy. Owning property that corrupts, and who's writing it? Somebody who owns property. Doesn't work. They don't give up the property, but they talk. Just do it. Make the work itself. And when it doesn't fit into the society, you've made a successful work. Because art, to be very romantic, is this thing that floats out that every society in the world makes. It has no place to be because it didn't exist before. It bangs against the walls, it chips things, it knocks things down. And then all of a sudden it finds a place and it settles in. And then it's not art anymore, it's art history.
That's beautiful. And I think it's actually a really great place to stop.
Okay.
I think I'm so thankful that you could come and share your thoughts with us.
Well, thank the people who arranged it. I didn't.
But honestly, it's a very generous thing to do, and I really think it's fantastic that you came.
Well,
and I know you've been a long travel. You've been to Bergen and here, and you're leaving in the morning. And so thank you so much for talking.
Well,
it's been
thank
great.
you for your generosity. It's not easy to sit there and listen to a person babble along. I really don't know. I'm not running for public office. Anything I even might have as desire from the people I'm looking at, there's no reason I'm allowed to have that desire. So in fact, thank you very much, really.
Thank you.